Well, when it comes to the best leaders, a slice of humble pie might be just what the CEO ordered, as research from the University of South Australia shows that humility is a critical leadership trait for cultivating cohesive and high performing teams. Here to tell us more is Chad Shu. Hi, Chad.
Hello, Alina. Good afternoon.
Well, tell us about this. What is leader humility? Explain that for us.
Well, when we thank you, Alina. So when we talk about leadership, being a humble leader is not a new idea, but not until recently that we start to systematic to study humility as an important leadership behavior, traits, or style. So by definition, leader humility, we define it as interpersonal traits that associates with one's behavior tendency to publicly admit your personal limitations, and you have the high willingness to recognize the followers' contribution and strength, and you also want to role model teachability. So those three behavior tendency makes you like human beings, and you don't really have to be like superhero. You want to recognize that there are other people know better than you are, and you kind of give those people the authority to lead a team, not just you, but this team is co-lead by the experts.
Well, obviously, we've gone through a really challenging time with the COVID-19 global pandemic. Have we seen world leaders show more humility, this year in the face of the pandemic, do you think?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, in our research team, we just realized that if you look at the leadership style of the most successful organizations or government, they control the COVID-19 pandemic, you realize that they have the common traits or behaviors that they respect expertise. They just give those decision making to the experts who have the ability to know that what is the best to for the general public, and rather than just saying that, hey, this is nothing, nothing important, just like a flu. And you can see a bad example like Donald Trump in the very beginnings, that he kind of ignore the fact that
Mm.
the pandemic could be a serious problem, and keeps telling his people like, this is not a big deal. You just trust me. I know better than anyone. That is where you can see the disaster begin.
So, I mean, is humbleness something that people can learn? Can people learn to be humble, or it's just a trait that you're born with?
Well, to be honest, the humility could be both. Like partially it could be partially a personal traits, but there's a couple recent study. We do have some sort of learning or training program. We try to teach and educate organizational leaders to learn humble. So, for example, like one study shows if you try to listen more before you talk, and that is the first step when you try to respect the other's strengths, and gradually that if you practice that technique, like listen
Mm.
first before you speak, and you will gradually become more humble, and people will sense that you are actually a humble leader.
Well, I mean, this is fantastic. I think as well, we've had workplaces shift a lot over the last 12 months. So, are there any other tips for leaders to practice humility, particularly as we're sort of working through our new normal and a lot of people aren't in that office framework?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think first of all, organizational leaders have to learn how to share your own limitation. So you have to understand that you don't have to be right at every time. Like you don't really have to know everything, and this is a very important step to make you human-like. All right, even as a leader, that you are a human, and you want to give the right message to your teams that I also need help, and there's something I don't know, and I do need you as an employee to lead me and to guide us sometimes. So that's the very first important first step, like share your own limitation. The second one is that a lot of times, as when you get authority, you also want to protect your own status. So the second suggestion is that try to engage in dialogue, not just debate. So it is very important to remind yourself that you are and your followers, you are on the same team. So you don't really have to win the arguments. You want to make sure that we make the decisions better for this team. The final suggestion will be to recognize and embrace the uncertainty and try to role model to be a follower. So nowadays, you just mentioned, ambiguity and uncertainty are part of the nature of our current business world. So, when the humble leaders, they just acknowledge that they don't really have always have the answers, they create a space for others to step in and take lead. And this is a critical step for the team to solve the problem in the proper or effective way.
Well, Chad, you've certainly given us plenty of tips there. Thank you so much for your insight on this topic and for joining us here on Ticker.